Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Careers and Coffee. Now, today is a really interesting one. You're definitely going to be engaged with our guest today. So we have Lois Cordelia. So she's a community artist, a speed painter, illustrator, demonstrator, tutor, so much. Easily one of the longest intros I've done there. So we're going to welcome Lois on today to talk to us a little bit more about her work.
Thank you, Jordan, for that lovely intro.
Good afternoon. Oh, it's so nice to have you at long last. And have you got coffee? This is the most important thing.
I have coffee, which I will be painting with. I have got green tea because I'm not really a coffee drinker.
It's all right. It's a hot beverage and it's in a mug, so I'm happy. But look, tell us a little bit more about you. Tell us what you do, who you are.
So as you rightly said, I'm all sorts of things. I'm primarily a freelance artist, and I'm often called a speed painter for a reason, because I do paint very quickly. I work very quickly in most mediums. I've been painting live in public a lot, more or less until lockdown sort of stopped everything like that. And so I've had to, I guess, shift over to working more behind the scenes, more online, more virtually. So I'm doing more and more on my YouTube channel. I have my own YouTube channel, just Lois Cordelia, to find me on there. So I've been doing a lot of free tutorials and demonstrations, much as I used to be painting live in public all the time. You might have seen me, some of you might have seen me down at Sailmaker Shopping Centre, for example, in Ipswich. And I used to stand there and paint live all the time. So the other thing I've recently started doing more of is I work part-time with our local Ipswich Inside Out community, which is, if you know about Inside Out community, they are a wonderful charity. Sorry?
Yeah, please tell us.
Yeah, they're a wonderful charity working with arts for mental health and well-being. And this is now such a focus for me as well. So I'm one of their program leaders. I had been teaching with them for years anyway. And so that's been a wonderful addition to all of my ordinary creative work as well during lockdown and everything.
That's astonishing. And I'm just having a look. We can see on the screen all of the fantastic work that you've been doing. And also, I think just before that page, there was also some elephants that I think a lot of folks might recognize. How did you get involved in that?
So what you've got on there at the moment are public art trail pieces and designs that I've done for trails all around the British Isles, including up as far north as Edinburgh and down as far as Jersey and the Channel Islands. Wow. I did 3 of the Elmer elephants for our local Ipswich trail. Was that last summer? Yeah, I think it was, before everything shut down. Of course, there would have been a lot of trails going on this year as well, which have all been obviously postponed until next year. I've just actually about 3 days ago, I heard I've got another Elmer to do for a trail down in Maidstone as well. This one, if I can see, yeah, that's one of the ones I did for a trail in London at Elephant and Castle. Oh, wow. Of course. So I do all sorts really. What I've been doing during the lockdown period is, I think, with that sort of emphasis on making use of art materials and things that you have at home and which anybody has access to at home. And that's been quite a big focus of my YouTube channel recently. So I've been using things like coffee for painting with, coffee and tea, which are wonderful art mediums. And I started off on that path really to find a medium that everyone has access to at home. And it's actually set me off on my own little adventure, and I've now been doing a lot of coffee painting. I've used it for a lot of different projects. Yeah, it's great fun actually. Really love painting.
Is there any that you might be able to show us?
Yes. You're going to, yes, right, you've got the cam on. What can you see? It's just loading. Hang on.
Yeah, I can see it. You might have to
You can see. All right. So I've literally just placed here a few examples that I've been working on recently. These are all parts. These are all for a film that I'm working on at the moment. So as you can see here, and I'll demonstrate in a minute. The way that I've been working here is using, for example, cut up store cards to print with the coffee, things like that, and using what do you call this, a glue spreader, to draw and paint very easily. It's sort of inspired by my work with palette knives. I don't know if you're familiar with palette knives, but it's really fun for actually working in this sort of way. So again, this would have been printed with various tools that everyone has access to at home. I've got various things here that might be useful. You know what I mean? So
that's brilliant.
They're fun to work on. So just trying to line the camera up so you can actually see. These were printed using the bottom. You know how you get a coffee mug and the proverbial stain around the base of a coffee mug.
Any times.
You print it down on the paper. So these, I think that's the slightly larger one, but I had all sorts of things. That one's slightly too large, but things that print to give you the right size, etc. Yeah, all that sort of thing. Oh, these are done with the coffee mug, I think. Yeah, there we go.
And how did you sort of discover that? Was it, had you left the coffee mug out on a letter or something and thought, actually, I can make that look pretty cool?
It's just sort of, often it's the random juxtaposition that goes with being an artist. You I'll start demonstrating. I mean, I've got my coffee here. Hopefully you can see that. So let's put a little bit of coffee along the bottom edge. We haven't had any requests yet, have we? I can't see any. So if I print that, let's just put that on there. Okay, and now you're asking how I discovered it. It's basically sort of trial and error, I think. But now, can you see what I'm doing? Hopefully. So I'm just going to
we can see it.
So I'm using the glue spreader here at this moment, but just see what happens. The reason I've got so many envelopes here, these are all just ordinary envelopes that I've been painting onto, was another of my projects that I did for my YouTube channel a few months back was snail mail, creative snail mail. Okay. And in a lot of ways, that's a great way of reconnecting people in these times of lockdown when we can't easily see people physically. To write a letter, send a letter in the post is something that cheers everyone up, boosts people's morale, and puts a smile on their face. And to do sort of creative ones like this is great fun actually. So I'm just making this up as I go. Very, very simple. And you can see what I'm doing. Checking the screen. So you can do all sorts of things with this. I'm trying to leave a vague space here for the address, but these sort of tools do work very much like traditional artist palette knives. This glue spreader, for example, I can smooth the coffee, the pigment out just as I'm doing here, or I can print very precisely. And let's put that one to one side.
It looks like we've got a question in. So where do you get your inspiration for your art?
Where do I not get my inspiration for art? It's just about anywhere and everywhere. Mostly nature, I think, is the answer. So let's do something nature inspired. Let's just make sure I've got the camera lined up. So I'm using the glue spreader again, just to you can see how easily it sort of prints here, hopefully. And we can make these very precise. And let's add a little bit of detail in there.
I think you also touched on sort of creative arts and sort of lockdown. I mean, how important has the creative arts world been during lockdown? You know, do you think people are appreciating those who work in that sector?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, they've been more important than ever, really, haven't they? We've all seen the inspiring trails and things that have been going on, the rainbow trails in people's windows, the elephants that we had here made of milk cartons, all sorts. I mean, I think the arts have really come into their own during lockdown in terms of keeping people's morale alive and inspiring people, keeping people sane.
Just a little bit.
Did you see that all right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So you can see how much detail you've got potentially on something like this. I think a lot of people think you can only paint with something like a brush, but I do use brushes. I've got plenty over there, but I really enjoy working with other tools as well.
And so for you, you know, I appreciate sort of a pandemic, so there's not always an average day. But yeah, what does an average day tend to look like for you?
It's like one of those funny memes that goes around, isn't it? Where it says, you know, what my friends think I do, what I think I do, and what I actually do. It's like one of those, isn't it? I think in reality, I mean, okay, I think most people assume when I say that I'm an artist, oh, you spend all day sketching and doing art and this sort of thing. But actually, in reality, a lot of my work is admin, keeping my website going, emails, correspondence, keeping in touch with clients, making sure that I've got the pictures lined up ready for commissions and that sort of thing. Doing mock-ups. When I say mock-ups, I mean things that are to show the client what a picture might look like.
Okay.
That sort of thing. So I've with the charity work as well lately, I've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings, and I think everyone's on Zoom these days, obviously, but that's been wonderful, very, very rewarding. Let's add a little spider in here.
So it sounds like fairly busy then, with everything that's been going on.
There aren't never enough hours in a day, Jordan. Absolutely. Just adding.
We've just got a question as well. So, did you always want to be an artist?
Yes, absolutely. It's so nice to know we've got listeners, actually. Hello to all of you out there. Yes, I absolutely always wanted to be an artist. And I think when I was at primary school, when people asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I always said, I want to be an artist. And then, of course, when I got a little bit older, people started saying, oh, you can't be an artist. Artists don't make money. You really need to get a real job. and then I was very sad, but I never gave up. So I've just ploughed on regardless, ignored all of the contrary advice, and actually I'm an artist. I'm a freelance artist. I do earn a living from my work, and I kind of feel quite vindicated by that. And I'm sorry, every time I laugh, it makes the camera shake. I've just realised. Anyway, the coffee will tend to what's the word, dribble down, so I need to keep it level, but you can sort of see when that dries. You might be able to see it on some of the others. It's almost semi three-dimensional when it dries as well.
And you must get
where you layer it on quite thickly.
And you must get so many sort of shades within that as it dries, you know, the strength of the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. I should say, if anyone wants to do this at home, this is instant coffee. Don't try using real coffee because it's not going to be intense enough for what you want. But instant coffee granules, quite a lot of them, tiny bit of water until you get something that's like a sort of a coffee soup, if you imagine. Okay, and then from there on, you know, you can of course thin it down if you want to, but it's rather nice to have that intensity of pigment. It's rather like using sepia ink. Okay. I might use that further in a minute because it's.
And we were talking about sort of artists there. So, you know, are there any artists that you admire?
Lots. So I worked for many years part-time with an artist, an illustrator of children's books in London called Jan Pinkowski, who did, I don't know if you know the Meg and Mog books from years back. I think he started them in the 60s, possibly. Meg, the friendly witch, and her black and white stripy cat. Jan co-authored that series back in the 60s, along with Helen Nichol. So I've worked with Jan so closely for years that it means that I suppose I've been greatly influenced by him. I should say Jan is the Polish form of John, in case you're wondering. So I think, although I've not really picked up a lot of actual art techniques from Jan, I've picked up a lot of the sort of philosophy of art, and his whole sort of approach has really stayed with me. The idea that he never really believed in mistakes. And I think a lot of people, you know, are very inhibited in art because they're terrified of making mistakes. And his whole approach was mistakes are gifts in disguise, and you sort of welcome them, you treat them as a little sort of a gift, that will point you in a slightly different direction from where you might have thought of going with your art or anything. And that to me has been hugely inspiring and influential in my own work. And I think, you know, in terms of experimenting with something like painting with coffee, I've only done that, I've only felt free enough to do that because I've worked with Jan for so long, and because he has this carefree attitude. I should say he's 80, I forget, 83 now or something, and he's sadly got Alzheimer's, and so he isn't really working anymore. But it was many years that I worked with him, and that he's been a huge influence on me. So he's one of the artists I greatly admire. More traditional artists, I really love El Greco's work. His sense of light and dark has always really inspired me. But gosh, there's just too many to mention really, but yeah.
I'll put you on the spot with that one. We've got another question in. So, what training did you do? Do you still keep learning new things and new art forms?
So, do you still keep learning new things? Always. I think the moment you stop learning is when you become old. I've always told people that. And so, yes, you keep experimenting, you keep learning. What training did I do? I've very little formal art training. I did A-level art at Northgate in Ipswich, and my A-level art teacher, Dan Emery at Northgate, was wonderful. He was really inspiring. He started me painting back then with acrylics, and I've gone on to teach painting all over East Anglia. So it's I owe him a lot in terms of starting me off on that journey. But I didn't do the foundation course or anything like that. I went and actually studied Arabic at university, as you do. The Arabic script, which I suppose I could actually do a little bit of Arabic writing on here just for a laugh, just to show you really. If I just maybe go over to the quill feather pen, and I was going to dip ink there. So if I were to write my name in Arabic just for a laugh, can you see? Yes, you can. So that's L, and that's the equivalent of the O, E, that's the S. That spells Lois in Arabic. I think what inspired me more than anything about Arabic was that it was the beautiful writing and the way it cascades down the page and that sort of thing. So it's still a huge influence on my work. Every mark I make here right now, I'm very much inspired by the Arabic writing, the freedom of it, the beauty of the script. So that was why I studied Arabic.
We've just got a question about Arabic. So, yeah, why did you pick it, and have you used it?
I have used Arabic as in terms of the actual language as well, but I don't use it very often these days. I went and actually did well, I was a volunteer team Arabist as part of an archaeological dig in Oman shortly after I did my degree. That was quite unusual and quite an experience. But I must admit, I'm happiest focusing on my visual art and using the Arabic in that sense of, you know, the beautiful flowing, yeah, the fluency of it is what really inspires me. So,
brilliant. And you also, so you know, you've touched on your speed painter, and obviously we can definitely see that. But you know, did you discover that at some point that you could speed paint?
I used to go down to the reggae nights in London years ago, and when I went there, I used to take my paints and I used to paint live during the sessions, and that was such a wonderful atmosphere, the music, the dance, everything together. And painting live, I suppose when you're painting live, you kind of have to get on with it. You can't just sort of, you can't make excuses. You have to just do it. And when people come up to you and paint something, ask you questions, I tend to share anecdotes advice, inspiration with them. They share their life stories often. It's one of the most wonderful things to paint live. Have we got time to squeeze one more? And I'll just do one very quick one.
I think we have.
So yeah, I think that was the. Oh, what's that? What other non-paint colours have you used to paint with? Tea, obviously. Tea is great for all that sort of thing. I've been, I suppose, rather than just painting with things, I've also been using recycled materials to paint onto. So I've been upcycling corrugated cards, old office stationery, that sort of thing. Yeah, I did a whole project very much like that. And that is really fun to, and sort of very much in the spirit of the times as well.
Fantastic. And we've just got another question. So what advice would you give to a student interested in a career in art?
Go for it, first of all. Don't be put off by people who say, oh, go and get a real job, because if you go and get a quotes real job, you won't be able to focus on your art. It's sensible to do, you know, part-time work by all means, but don't be put off following your heart. And you have to really believe in yourself as well, and don't be put off by people who criticize you or belittle you, because at the end of the day, it's what you make of it. And keep experimenting. Don't be tied down by rules. I don't know, sort of all sorts of.
I think that's brilliant advice. You know, it was, I suppose when those when you're at school and saying, you know, you want to be an artist, and again later in life, was there any moments when you actually thought, no, you know, maybe I should pursue and, you know, get a quote proper job?
Very rarely, but I think when people wind you down to the point where you're really depressed and you're lacking, you know, you lose that self-confidence, that's when you sort of begin to doubt yourself. And at that point, yeah, I think everybody has those moments, but I mean, I've just sort of, as I said earlier, just ploughed on regardless, and it's worth it. It really is worth it.
Fantastic.
So
that's brilliant.
That's my other advice, definitely. Yeah.
That looks fantastic. I'm just mesmerised, honestly. Usually I get questions at guests, but I'm just sort of like eyes on. That looks amazing.
Oh. Well, I'm so pleased. I hope you have a go. Do have a go.
So
these blue spreaders are store cards that I've chopped up to make sort of custom palette knives. So you've got different lengths of quotes blade on there. Do you know what I mean?
You mentioned with tea. I assume it's a similar process, just lots of tea bags instead of lots of coffee.
The tea is the tea is useful because you've got different types of tea. I mentioned green tea. I'm a huge tea drinker, so I've got like the fruit teas, which are bright red, and I've got blue matcha tea, which is made with blue flower petals, and it makes quite an intense blue color. And then you've got things like turmeric tea, which is quite bright yellow, and so on, as well as traditional tea. So you've got a whole range of different colors with tea. That's why I like it. It's almost like a watercolor palette.
Tea's the new paint. I love it. Well, look, I think now that you've completed that one, I think this has been absolutely an amazing conversation. I've learned so much, not only about just there's stuff in the house that you can create such beautiful pieces of art, but also to, I think, battle some of those misconceptions around what's a proper job and all of those sorts of things. And actually, if you do want to consider this as a, just do it. Don't let anybody get in your way, and just really pursue it moving forward. So just a huge thank you for coming on to Careers and Coffee. I think this has been one which I've just been absolutely glued to the screen. And I know that for anybody who is still interested, we've got I think it's a pumpkin video, of an outro, which I believe we may be having on. But just a huge thank you for coming on to Careers and Coffee. And it's just awesome. We'll have to have you back for like lots of different themed sessions. I like this. This is brilliant.
Well, if you want to see more, do look me up on YouTube and obviously on my website as well. But I do try and post up at least one new thing every month on YouTube. So coffee painting will be my next film. So yeah, really
love it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. So folks, that was Lois, Cordelia. Just what an amazing session. I mean, we've never had somebody doing live art whilst having a conversation. I mean, I definitely can't do that with trying to multitask. Just absolutely awesome. So huge thanks to Lois for coming on to Careers and Coffee today. So that's the end of this week's sessions. What we are going to do now, however, is to have a pumpkin video as sort of our outro that we're going to host here, so that you can keep seeing some of the content and some of the brilliant work that Lois has done. So stick around for that, and we'll host that video. But be sure to tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12:30 to 1, to see us on Careers and Coffee. Thanks.
Hello, welcome. It's nearly Halloween. That can only mean one thing. People have often asked me if I do pumpkin carving. It seems a natural assumption based on the fact that I do very intricate work with a surgical scalpel cutting out of paper. So you'll be shocked to hear that I've only ever attempted it once in my life before. It's about time we put that right. So I'm going to see what we can create out of these beautiful pumpkins, squashes and gourds. These were all supplied by our very own vegan Hank's supermarket here in Ipswich. Big shout out if you're listening. You've been an absolute godsend during this pandemic. Whenever I embark on a new art project, I always like to set the scene. You'll probably recognize some of my familiars. So now let's step inside the magical orange glowing world of the winter squash. Squashes and gourds come in all shapes, sizes and colors, so I'm going to consider the sculpting potential of each one in its own right. Let's start with this beautiful acorn squash. I sliced off the larger end and hollowed out the seeds, but kept the flesh intact for maximum 3-dimensional carving depth. I started off with a small knife to establish a few basic angles, and then soon switched to lino cutting tools. It's been 20 years since I did lino cutting, though I've done a lot of paper cutting in the meantime. There are a lot of similarities between these related art forms, but this is definitely the first time I'm properly carving in 3 dimensions. The deep green skin and bright yellow flesh of the acorn squash suggested a green man or foliate face, which is a timeless symbol that I've often referenced in my artwork in various mediums. Even the name acorn squash links with oak leaves. The crisp outlines and strongly contrasting colours are reminiscent of my paper cut designs, though in this case there is also 3-dimensional depth to every cut. This piece won't have a light inside, and it is of course still edible.